Okay, on to the back. So now we're going to look at this example. So I've got 10x squared plus 43x minus 9. And so I want to factor this. Well, the first thing I notice is that my A coefficient is not a 1, it's a 10. So I'm going to check for my GCF. So I've got math over 9, 10, comma, and now remember, I can't put in a negative 43, so I'm going to have to put in a positive 43. And their greatest common factor is 1. So the GCF is 1. Well, if you get a GCF of 1, if you divide any number by 1, is that number going to change? And the answer is no. So I'm not going to divide because my coefficients won't change if I divide them all by 1. So I'm going to leave my A coefficient as 10. My B is going to be a negative 43, and my C is going to be a negative 9. So now I'm ready to find my factor list because I'm going to use my original trinomial. So 10 times negative 9 is negative 90. And so now I'm going to find my factor list for 90, or negative 90. So I'm going to go y equals, I'm going to get negative 90 divided by x, and to my table. And so now I've got 1 and 90, 2 and 45, 3 and 30, 4 is a decimal, so I'm not going to include that, 5 and 18, 6 and 15, 7 is a decimal, 8 is a decimal, and 9 and 10. And now if I go down one more, I'm going to see that 9 and 10 are listed as repeats again, so I'm done with my factor list. So I have 6 factors to choose from. So now we're going to create our x puzzle just like we've been doing. So I want to multiply to a negative 90, but I want to add to a negative 43. So I'm going to look at my options in my list of factors, and the only one that can get me to 43 is 2 and 45. So now I've got to figure out which number has to be negative in order to get a sum of negative 43, which is my B coefficient, which comes from my middle term. And negative 45 has to be the negative. So now I'm going to start to fill in my puzzle, and if you remember, your lead term goes in the top left box, so that's going to be 10x squared. Your constant term, or the last term of your trinomial, is going to be your bottom right box, so that's going to be negative 9. And the diagonal boxes are going to combine to make our middle term the negative 43x. And what's going to get filled in here is going to come from my x game. So I'm going to fill in one box with a negative 45x and a positive 2x. And the reason why these get x's is because they have to be a like term with the x term. So I have to put x's on these values. So now I'm going to use my calculator and fill in this box, and I'm going to look at my like common factors, my greatest common factor. So I'm going to use my calculator because I can't think of the greatest common factor between 10 and negative 45. It's just escaping me right now. So 10, comma, and again, don't put in the negative, you're just going to put in 45. And their greatest common factor is 5. Okay, well, if this was just an x squared in the box, I know I would have to put an x times an x here, because 5x times, or x times x is going to make x squared. Well, I got to make sure my multiplication is correct. 5x times what x is going to make 10x, and hopefully you said a positive 2. And now 5x times what is going to make a negative 45x, and that should be a negative 9. What times 2x is going to make 2x, that would be a positive 1. And 1 times negative 9 is going to fill in the box with negative 9. So now I'm ready to write my factors for my trinomial, and I would have to multiply the factors of 2x minus 9 times 5x plus 1 to get the final trinomial of 10x squared minus 43x minus 9. So this time we did not use a GCF. We factored our trinomial, but we had to check for it first.